Yeah, I'm like, where is everybody? You guys got 2 minutes. What the hell? All right. It's okay. Hey. Hey,
How you doing?
I'm managing.
Yeah.
Whew. Thank you. What is this? Footrest? What is this? Footrest? All right. Whatever.
It's just an extra chair.
I had no idea my class was so relaxing. All right. Man, this class is empty this week. Whew. Semester's catching up with you guys. It's not even half over. So I had a couple of folks who called in sick. So they should hopefully be on the stream. We'll see. It's all good. Like I said, I record these things. They sound and look as good as they do. And so it's always going to be better if you're here, but whatever. It's all, you know, if you're sick, I'd rather you didn't come in and infect everyone like I did. And, but you know, yeah, that's no problem. We'll get through it. These live streams are always posted on the announcements about an hour or two before class. So if you're not available to be here and you are wondering if it's going to be on the live stream will be there. You can always also, for whatever reason, which is funny because now I have 12 of you, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Whatever. It's like, yeah, great. You can watch my lectures until the sun explodes. And you can obviously get notified when live streams are coming up there too as well. So it's all Good. All right. So gonna do a quick round of attendance because I'm starting. I'm now looking at my. I'm only halfway through the semester. I still don't have all your names. It's hopeless. I'm sorry. It's terrible. But oh well, there it is. So if I call out your name, it's because I don't know who you are. If I don't call out your name, or if I mention, oh yeah, you're here, it's because I've now finally put you into my brain as a face, and I've got. It does not mean that if I call out your name, I don't like you, or I don't know who you are, or don't recognize your name. It just I haven't made the mental connection, and that's what it is. So I don't see Richard here. Richard Burns, no, he's not here. Buddy, I knew was not. Buddy's not going to be here tonight. Sam Dyer, there you are. All right, Logan, no Logan. Logan, no, not Logan. You're coughing, you're sneezing, and you're coming into class. Oh, he's also wearing headphones. He doesn't hear me. You're coughing, you're sneezing, and you're coming into class. No, that's all right. You had your headphones on, so you couldn't hear me. Justin, yeah, gotcha. Don't see Alyssa. She's not here. All right. Katharina's not here. Travis. There you are. Elliot. You're here. Yes. Jacob with a K. No? All right. Chris McPherson. There you are. Coleman. Coleman?
Oh, yeah.
I was like, wait. Yeah. Jake Nunley. No, I don't think Jake is here. Evan's not here. Bodie's not here. And that's the rest of you. So, yes. I've seen everybody else. Yeah. Hi. All right. So I know where you guys are. So again, hopefully I'll get this to where I'll mutter at a couple of you. And then once I finally got it in my thick skull, we'll be on to better and better things. Okay. Lots to go over. Lots to talk about this week. Man, this is kind of crazy. So for the film festival, which is rapidly approaching, trust me, my head is filled with the minutia. I am going to come in with some tickets for you guys. If any of you are interested in there's some educational panels that would be really valuable. I talked about last week about this audio program for documentary audio, and I'll bring in some passes for that, some tickets for that. Also, I'm kind of trying to compile the final list of the filmmakers who are actually coming, because trust me, we're 3 weeks out and there's still some questions to that. We know we have about 55 filmmakers coming, so filmmakers and guests like producers and other folks. So we will get to all of that, and I will try and make them available to you guys so that you guys can come check it out for free. Woo! On your spring break even. Yeah, I know. You're like, yeah, thanks, Randy. Cool. All right. Let's go to the next portion of our show. Where would be a good place to download custom fonts for After Effects? This is actually an easy question, but it might not occur to people that they have resources already available to them. Two obvious ones that if you don't already know about, you should, are Google Fonts. How many of you guys have heard of Google Fonts? Yeah, a couple of you. All right. So you realize that these are basically licensed for whatever use you want. So you can download them, use them in After Effects, however you please. And there's a lot of choice there. There's actually quite a lot of a variety. They have monospace type fonts. They've got decorative and display, and then obviously serif and sans serifs and in all varieties. So check that out. Also, for Creative Cloud subscribers, you do have Adobe Typekit for your Creative Cloud subscription. So you do have access to those fonts. That's a little bit trickier. Those aren't always licensed for every possible use, but generally speaking, for your certainly for student projects and possibly for you know, whatever projects you want to get paid to do, they are an option as well. And then, of course, there is the World Wide Web that has plenty of weird and bizarre typeface resources that are out there. Google is your friend. Don't hold back. There is no, that's another one of these where you can spend a lot of time researching fonts and maybe find what you're looking for. I couldn't figure out how to render this week's assignment. As per the assignment to the format, QuickTime, frame size, 960 by 40, frame rate 2997. What is the correct procedure if I want to use Adobe Media Encoder? So if you don't see a preset, you have to go into the video details and set it up yourself. So let's take a look at this lovely composition that we're going to export. So we'll go over here, we'll add it to the Adobe Media Encoder queue, and then we'll, of course, wait for Adobe Media Encoder to wake up. I didn't think to launch that before doing this, but at any rate, we'll let it start up. Well, actually, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow it up with the next question because it's related. I was able to successfully output the reformatted video sequence from Media Encoder, but could not figure out how to change the output pixel dimensions from within the render queue. So hang on. There we go. Nope. There we go. Is there a way to do this from the render queue, changing to 960 by 540? So it's this resizing footage down to the smaller size. So when you export from Adobe Media Encoder, you know, notice that your comp is going to be whatever it is. I mean, in this case, it is it's 1080p, so 1920 by 1080, and 30 frames a second. So when you come in here, you do have you have presets, of which, generally speaking, the ones that most of you are going to probably have right away is going to be QuickTime. Another option that you can explore or commonly set yourself up with is this H.264 preset. These kind of just give you, these are categories of presets. These aren't individual presets by themselves. Once you select one of these, the actual preset is revealed here. So if we stick with, well, we'll go to QuickTime. And of course, the daemon NTSC DV presets are there. If you happen to have selected one of those, you can. What you do is, if you don't want to use this preset, you have to click on it in order to. And I've got to turn out the lights because, of course, once again, there we go. All right. So. It brings up the export settings, and you can come in here, and the fact that it's set to this preset is more or less irrelevant. You can come in here and change the video codec in this video section right here to whatever you want, in this case H.264. As soon as you do that, you'll see that some of these open up for you, and you'll notice that these settings are wildly out of sync. So let's set those to match the source. Uh, 1920 by 1080, which is the same size as the comp. If you want to resize it, you have to uncheck, and then you can come in here and type 960, and 540 drops in there automatically. So this is how Adobe Media Encoder, if you need to change the output format or the output size, you can do that. If for any reason it's set to this check mark, you'll be frustrated because this is grayed out, and you're like, Randy, I can't change the settings. And but all you have to do is just click that, clear that, and then you can change this to your favorite down res or up res. I mean, you can make this Ultra HD if you wanted to. So that's how you do it from Media Encoder. Now this might be a little less smooth, but in the render queue, you do actually have a render settings right here. And what that tells you is what the size settings. Now notice that it is, you do have the ability to change them to whatever you want based on the resolution of the output. So the current settings, because the comp is 1920 by 1080, if you just leave it at full, that's what you're going to get. If you turn it to half, you divide that by 2, and you find the output size is going to be 960 by 540, and that would be how you would export a down-resed version of your comp in the render queue. Not necessarily, again, not super smooth. It's not quite as customizable there. You're using a multiplier, so you can do it to a third or to a quarter, which really starts to get small. Or you can come in here and change the resolution custom for the horizontal and vertical to your desire. So you can, but obviously you can't do partial pixels, so it's not like you can do 1.5. Well, maybe you can, actually. Let's see if it, can you do 1.5? Three, then you're getting a 1/3. So yeah, again, it's easy what you're doing. Yeah. But once again, the render queue is not your usual output target these days because of the fact that the choice of outputs is relatively limited. Okay. Back to the show. All right. So so that's this. When you don't see a preset, go into the video details and set it up. Similar really bad. Other predictable, which is the order of the day when it comes to between similar almost similar necessary from Photoshop with actually so you guys need to because we'll just do 7.5. Mine is can all right. I'll just go save this. Again. Save it to the okay. Open footage or let's see if my name is Randy out of this. Yeah, so pixels So pixels. It's not you do. If you do have a bad thing, if you can have text in it, text layer totally. Generally speaking, going to come in here. It does beg the question. But so that's what guess is no. And illuminates than the end. As using an alpha layer. One you could layer to yet another layer, and that other so I've got two of these for fun. And what let's put a shape on a new star. Stars to star. Maybe and so there we go. We know first one. It does the star. This correct. Okay. Alpha mat. The star. The alpha. Stack. So basically doing this is why invisible. That's why you lose this. It's here. This again. Example, we select an aluminum. But you're expecting. Example. So this because to this. Get back to okay. I'll say that you illuminate that you can link of like import fonts. Posture actually and so you can need to settings in what time effects. Complicated. Addition. There you go. Actually, no. Let's limit, but we're here. Why? Good lady. A ability to you can move things. So I've got all my all week. Play that and a it it's in this at the first seven. It's particularly complicated. Take a lot to, what you'll see, get this thing. So now that it's not playing, idea to see to do it is generally what'll happen you run. So what you'll do when you gain this green bar, if you move a key to via one memory games has any being filled, going to run at real now frames. It's that kind of automatic thing that changed the these, but Adobe Access. We're going to get into positing by elsewhere in composite, and it's not really using mode track with that fundamental. Plug for if you industries still you thought that atom dimension to the find ways that you can with, but so cost money, a few dollars. So from these chemicals. Color so that was different thing because and chemical product and that was After Effects done it's equally well. And if you want to be able to edit, if you have the editable. In After Effects. Actually, basic, which was not ago was left. If you said as color, for you can good. You can do a very flexible. That's a surprise. Somebody's just all right. Motion and text of the display is in. You have this in looking at ability to turn in this parent background. So actually, so died and so a little better. Okay, so just ignore these marks that will get all the way around, and the age of received, and so you actually in your television. So to basically of your for had as the TV. Sorry for going down color head of electron. And as a magnet, it would deflect on at the center. This boundary area where text So this is called the area. Okay. We have the text safe. Anything the box displays inside the digital parts of general are be done. This will safe boundary. Reticle very there's for your foot text operators, you'll where watermark the bottom. Fairly far to the edge. The definition TV still uses. But so they still have the so let's see what we're going to talk. This this week we're not doing an available to there are some questions. Forward if you want. I want will be after. Okay, so boy, it's funny just now. So we've already discussed the different used to seeing. You might have, and we'll get so After Effects and we'll do some other fun stuff. All right, let's choose for a go log and a one it's a little let's. Okay. Yeah. All right, and we'll stuff is file within actually I have it in here. I really want quickly to it does kind of talk better. Anyway, it is. Oh, notice when I open it, resolves on based on so it howdy. I'm so once you think about this raw material. play with. Okay. Yeah. Try to avoid is D at what I'm show you guys. Business is one of the guys to that you can get. You get to you for by clicking on the tonight. We're just some of the action in these computers. To do comp for me for now. HDTV 1097. That's film students, so you should. And background color. Once you have your setting, click OK. And background general. You know, it doesn't. You guys design. This again. You know. Your mileage. Trying to put anything. And turn. If you knew certain. Shop. Boundaries on the screen. Things to that's the way you roll. Welcome. So for after like some so and then your greenhouse. So one of the things that's kind of complicated. Grab Eric.a and your this our Illustrator file, basically a involves all pixelated, right? They have vector graphics file like embedded PostScript or something like that, SVG as well. After Effects will immediately render it to a raster graphic, so like a JPEG or a PNG or something like that. And it's a fixed resolution. So if you scale it, you're going to get this. If you click this little star, though, watch what happens. It immediately snaps into a nice, crisp, scaled look. So for vector graphics, when you're dealing with this, you can click on this little button to make it immediately go sharp. Because if you turn it off, it'll go back to the size that it was when it was first imported, which is relatively low resolution. And so it's going to look soft, and you're going to be all upset, like, what the hell, man? This is Illustrator. This should be like, I can make this the size of the sun and it still be nice and crisp. And so it's the constant rasterizing button right there that you want to do. Again, this little button has two functions. This is one of them, and the other has to do with pre-comps and how transformations are performed between pre-comps and the comps that they're in.
Is there a way of getting to one of the functions and not the other? Because I don't see a difference, but it says when I click on it.
No, because this is a vector graphic layer. That's why it's behaving this way. So there's no, I mean, you don't want to, you're not going to collapse transformations on a vector graphic because it's not a pre-comp. So one is not the other. It's like, a door is not a jar. Well, actually, okay. So that was fun fact number one, but that's not a keyframe. So let's talk about how we can. So there's two. Again, I kind of hinted at it in the earlier in the Q&A, is that you can animate just about anything in here, but what several things that we'll talk about is, I want to talk about position, because that actually has two meanings in After Effects, whereas most of the other ones really only have one notion. So like opacity, scale, all these other features really have just one foot that those keyframes live in, whereas position actually has a couple. So when you so for a shortcut, if you select this layer, so click on it and then type the letter P, you'll see that it actually brings down just the position attribute for that layer. If you wanted to look at other ones, you could type O for opacity. Sorry, O for, well, all right, I'm clearly not doing this. No, it's not O for opacity. That's why it's not working. It's T for opacity, S for scale, yeah, A for anchor point. Is there any others useful ones that are immediate? These are kind of the big ones. Yeah, the one that's always the gotcha is people will type O thinking opacity is the letter O, but it's not, and for reasons I don't remember off the top of my head. So if you also want to look at all of them together, you can obviously do so by just clicking this little reveal triangle. This little disclosure triangle will show you this transform group. Notice that there's nothing else attached to this right now because there's no effects on this. So the only thing that Adobe Illustrator files have when you import them is a transform group. So if you wanted to set or if you wanted to keyframe the position of this, you could, well, actually, first of all, let's move it to the beginning of this. Move the playhead to the beginning of this. You can do this with the home or the home key on your keypad as well. Click the little stopwatch to enable keyframes. This is obviously the same way it works in Premiere. And you can move forward in time. Now remember that to move, if you wanted to just move one frame forward, you can hit the page down to move one frame forward. If you hold down the shift key, you move 5 frames forward, or maybe it's 10. Yeah, it's 10 frames forward. So if you wanted to, so what we can do is, or we can just hit end, and at the end, we want to talk about where we want this graphic to be at the end of the animation, and that will be over here. So now you have a start and an end that are showing on this on the screen. So as you can see, you'll see that you have both keyframes exposed on screen, and you can navigate between them. So and this is your most basic animation. It's not worth really spending a lot of time with, but it's very slowly moves from the top to the bottom and from the left to the right. So now if you wanted to make this more sophisticated, you could say come 2 seconds in, or type 2 seconds here, 200, and you'll go do the same thing, and move this where you want it to go. And you'll see that the path that the keyframes traverse, or that the shape will traverse, adjusts accordingly. So now when you, at 2 seconds, at 1 second it's going to be over here, at 2 seconds it's going to be over there, and you'll see that these are all what they call interpolated keyframes, are going to show you where at any particular point on this where the playhead is, where that shape is going to be at that time. All right, so let's move forward a couple more seconds to say 4 seconds, and we'll move the logo over here. And then to wrap things up, we will actually, so the other thing I want you to do is come to the last keyframe that's on the timeline and bring it to about 6 seconds. So you'll just drag it over to where you can. So you can, for any of these keyframes, you can actually just pick them up and drag them where you want them, okay? Important thing to note, you can also you can select multiple keyframes, and if you drag them, they will all drag together. I believe that if you hold down the Option key or the Alt key and you drag them, you'll see that they actually scale according to where you are. So I'm holding down the Alt key on my keyboard while I'm dragging this last keyframe, and you'll see that all of them scale in accordance. So they all stay relatively the same distance from each other. So whereas if you take your hand off the keyboard and you just click and drag, you're dragging all of those keyframes just across the timeline, which can be useful. So, but just understand that you can do multiple ways of doing it. All right. So now we've got this logo that's kind of zigzagging across the screen. If you preview it, it's going to kind of bounce from point to point and not do anything after 6 seconds, or I guess now at this point it's 5 seconds and change. Yeah, 5:17. So let's actually move it back out to 6 seconds. I'm going to hold down the Alt key, drag these over, and now. So in 6 seconds, it's going to do this little Z formation. Okay. So basic, I mean, obviously these are Mickey Mouse notions, but this sets us up for a couple of things to discuss. So there's two things that work here. You actually have, in this for this one property of position, you have two ways to think of keyframes here. You have the where the keyframe is positioned on screen, Okay, that is called spatial. And then you have where those keyframes are positioned on the timeline, and that's called temporal. So there's these two types of keyframes. And the way that you can easily see them is if you command or right click on a keyframe and you come down to keyframe interpolation and you click on that, you'll see that you actually have a couple of, you have two ways of thinking of these positional keyframes. And it's really unique to positioning. It doesn't, for scale or other ones, they don't have a spatial component. There's no position, there's no X and Y coordinates that matter. The only other one of these that has that is anchor point. Anchor point has positional coordinates. So you do have spatial keyframes for the anchor point and for position, but not for any of these other notions. So now, what we've shown you so far is these little diamond-shaped ones. You guys know that there are different types of keyframes from the point of view of how keyframes behave from one to the other. Does anybody have any ideas what they call these? That's all right. Okay, that's fine. So the way that they're currently set up for you right here is that from a temporal positioning, you'll see that these are linear keyframes, and that's the reason is that they are diamond-shaped keyframes on your timeline, meaning that from one to the next, the speed coming in and the speed going out are identical. It maintains a linear velocity across all of it. You do have some other choices in here. You have Bezier, continuous Bezier, auto Bezier, and hold. So we'll talk about kind of a couple of these. Hold is a unique one that we'll get to. And most of the time when you talk about these, you are going to talk about them as Bezier types of keyframes. And this is where you start to see these hourglass notions and what that means is that over time, the keyframes will start slowly and then accelerate. And then as they come to the next keyframe, they'll be accelerated to a certain point, about midpoint, and then they start to slow down as they come in to the next keyframe. These are also commonly referred to as easy ease. You'll see that a lot in terms of how, so the automatic way to apply Bezier keyframes for interpolation is by using easy ease. So if we hit Control Z and select these keyframes and hit F9, where's F9? F9, oops, oh, I have to use these keyboards, these newfangled keyboards. All right, so if you hit in this case, I had to hit the FN function key and then F9 to change them to these what they call easy ease keyframes, but they're basically Bezier keyframes. So, because when you look at them, that's all that happens when you switch from linear to using easy ease, is you're switching from linear to Bezier. What does that mean? So how does the behavior of this change when you go from linear to Bezier? You'll notice that it slows down as it hits each of these midpoints. As each of those keyframes, it slows down and then speeds back up, and then slows down as it reaches one and then speeds back up, and then comes into a reasonably soft landing. Okay? So there you go. That is what Bezier looks like. Now, for these internal ones, you have a notion of these. Notice that they tend to come in for the soft landing in between there. You can actually change these. I think we can change them to continuous, right? Did that change anything? It probably didn't change anything. That's all right. Actually, in this case, they behave the same. But what I want to get to is actually, I want to show you a different feature over this. Is notice that as they, Well, as they approach these keyframes, they're slowing down and then they speed back up and they slow down and speed back up. Whereas when they were linear keyframes before, it would just bounce from one to the next. The velocity never slows. It just stays constant throughout. Now, another way to look at that is by using this little graph editor. And we're coming up on a break, so just give me a couple more minutes and then we'll take a break. The next thing that you can look at is this button over here next to the timeline called the graph editor. If you click this little graph, you'll see that the values of each of these coordinates are changing over time, but you can also look at it as a speed graph. So right now you're looking at the value graph, which corresponds each of these lines with one of these values over time. Now, mostly because the position is the one that's keyframed, it's the one that's actually moving. This is your position, and I believe this is, so this is the Y and this is the X. So as you move from one to the next, you'll see that the Y really didn't change very much on this. Then it changes to the Y changes to this value. So that's this move, dropping it down here, and then it's zigzag. So these two zigs are the X coordinates here. Those two are these X coordinates there, and the Y position on the graph shows you this. That's all well and good. That shows you the spatial keyframes, but you can also look at them as speed by clicking Edit Speed Graph. So that's this little choose graph type and options. That's if this next to the eyeball is choose the graph type. You can actually edit the speed graph. And what you'll notice is on linear keyframes, these are the speed is generally pretty constant throughout. It starts at 612 pixels per second. Then at the second set between this keyframe and that keyframe, it's actually traveling at 648 pixels a second. And then finally, for this last writ, it is doing 650. So this is the speed of the animation over time. You can actually flatten that curve out. And the way that you do that is by selecting these intermediate keyframes and selecting, I think we can do it here, can't we? No, maybe we can't do it here. We have to change it. All right.
I think at the bottom line of, I don't have that.
Which bottom line?
The eyeball, the bottom line of.
You don't have that on yours? Are you looking at the speed graph? Let's see.
Oh.
They're all clustered together on yours because you got a bigger screen than I do.
No, I didn't. I guess
you have a higher res screen. That's why. Yeah. Okay. So select these two keyframes here and there, and if you come over to you'll notice you have some shortcuts here, and I'm sorry that you guys can't see it very well in the room, but you see these keyframes over here. These are little shortcuts to things like easy ease and converting selected keyframes to linear or to hold keyframes or to auto Bezier. You also have the option of just editing them individually. So for these two, what we want to do is do what's called roving over time, or roving across time. And what that will do is it's going to flatten this speed curve or speed for across all of these keyframes. So if you select that, what happens is now the keyframes, now you see that the speed graph is perfectly flat between the first and last keyframes. And the speed should basically be the same across all of them. So it's basically, you can move things, but it doesn't change the position of the keyframes. It just changes the speed so that the speed is constant between all three. Okay, so it's a few minutes after 8. Let's take a 10-minute break, come back, and keep on trucking. So there's more to show you guys tonight. If you haven't started doing your homework, you can obviously come up and grab it. And if you weren't here at the beginning of class, I did take roll, so come up and talk to me so that I make sure I get you registered. All right. So now we have a sense of what you can do with, you know that there's a difference between spatial keyframes and temporal keyframes, or how they're treated. They're not different. I mean, this is the same keyframe between, this is the same keyframe here as this one here, okay? They are the same keyframe. It's just how they behave in one dimension, whether space or time, is actually different based on it being a positional sort of keyframe. So now, as a distinction, you can also do a, we can also, well, we'll switch back here to the regular, switch away back to the timeline. We can now keyframe a second notion of scale. So we'll keep scale on here, and maybe we, at 6 seconds, we'll drop another keyframe. And actually what'll happen is that in these intermediate keyframes, it will also be, we'll have it kind of scale down a little bit. So we'll run it down to, let's say, actually we'll just type it in here at 55%. And the nice thing is that you can just click on that value, change it, and it will create a new keyframe value there. I'm using the arrow keys here to move forward to the next keyframe in this so that the keyframes actually kind of align with each other. I'm going to say this one is also 55. And so now what's going to happen is over time this switches to, it scales down, stays small, and then scales back up. So it looks like it's fading into the background while it's also doing this. That's the visual effect. But now if you look at these keyframes and you go to keyframe interpolation, you'll notice that spatial is grayed out. There's no way to change spatial interpolation because it doesn't exist for this keyframe. It doesn't exist for this property. But you do have the ability to have it play as, let's see, we can do these as, yeah, all right, we'll do them as just Bezier keyframes. So come in here, right click, go to keyframe interpolation, and click on Bezier. Click OK. These now tends to, it will stay the same size, but now and the scale actually will come to a stop in this frame here. So what'll happen over time is that the scale will start at a certain, will shrink at a certain rate, and then come to a nice smooth conclusion of that. And the way that looks on the speed graph is like this. This is what these curves look like. Now I'm going to zoom this so that it's a little more clear. So over time, you'll see that it starts here and actually grows a little bit. So that's the funny part of this, is that it actually will go, starts at, oh no, sorry, it does shrink. It's just not shrinking as fast. So it will shrink at a relatively fast pace, and then it kind of comes to a little flat spot here where the speed of its change is slowing, and then again it comes to another kind of slow down spot, and then comes to a rest at this point. So the change in these transitions from here to there are all happening over, darn it, I'm going to turn this, get you out of my way. There we go. So I'm going to bring you back down so that I can see the whole thing. The idea of these keyframes are that you have the ability to affect how they behave over time. Now you'll see that as you select them, you do have these little control points that you can play with. And what they actually will do is they change the nature of that speed curve in one way or another. So you'll see that it flattens it out. So at one point, it makes it very flat, meaning that it stays at one speed and then quickly changes to another, which is not quite as smooth. Or it can be very straight, meaning that the speed is actually changing very consistently over time, which when we were dealing with them as linear keyframes, that's what it should have looked like. So let's switch back so that I can switch these back to how they looked before. All right, so now they are linear keyframes once again. If we go back to the speed graph, you'll see that the speed change is very abrupt based on where in the animation it is. So it starts at one size, it quickly changes speed to another size. This is where it's actually, oh no, this is where it's shrinking. It stays the same, and then it grows back to the original size. So that's what you're looking at here. So you have this 0 is actually, no change at all in the value, and then the change happens over time. But these are not necessarily, they don't necessarily need to be tied vertically like this. They can actually be moved and affected this way. So this is kind of what the same sort of thing that doing the easy ease does, is it brings those two nodes together to create a single editable node. So, but you don't have to treat it that way. You can treat them separately. So let's take a look at how that behaves, or how that looks in the animation. So turn off the path, we watch it. So you might think that that's a little bit smoother, maybe not. Maybe it's on the way towards being the sort of graph that you're looking for. If you want to experiment with changing these values so that they behave more interestingly, you can absolutely change how values change over time this way. So how that might look is that it's going to continually, it's continuing to shrink until it hits this point, and then at this point it starts to grow again, and it's growing more or less, at a different, at relatively the similar speed throughout. So that's what this graph ends up playing for you, is you see that the speed change over time, or the value change over time, is relatively linear. We can make it more so or less so. It's pretty common in motion graphics these days to have what they would call very aggressive speed changes. And so let's talk a little bit about what that looks like from the point of view of this. So what I'll do is actually, I'm going to duplicate this this composition. So I come up to the comp 1 and I press Command or Control D to get a second one, double click it, and we're going to come over here and wipe out by starting at the home. I'm going to turn off these position and scale keyframes, so they're basically wiped out by doing that. I'll also turn off the graph editor. So when you want something to move from one point to another, you can set a keyframe, obviously. Maybe put it at 3 seconds and have this keyframe move to the other end of the screen. So it goes from here to there. Also notice that we were talking about spatial keyframes. You do have the ability to modify or the temporal keyframes. We do have the ability to modify spatial keyframes in a similar way, so that they don't have to necessarily be linear travel from one point to another. They can also be dealt with as they can do more complicated behavior from one point, just between two keyframe points on the screen. So that's always an option as well to get, you know, motion, more sophisticated motion without having to add a bunch of keyframes to try and get this, is that you do have these control points. You can treat them like Bezier curves in, you know, like you would in Illustrator or sometimes even in Photoshop, where you can play with these control points to create sophisticated motion. All right, let me zoom out. There we go. So now when you do that, you actually, the behavior across time is still linear. So what if we wanted to make it a little more exaggerated? We can actually come in here with the speed graph. Yep, here we are. And change how these keyframes behave. So we can select these keyframes and change their behavior by maybe starting out slower. Oh, come on now. Don't be fussy. There we go. All right, so you can start slower, meaning that you start at 0, and what you'll notice is that it starts really slow. It's a slow start, so that's like an ease. All right, so that's what this behavior looks like. And then it has a linear input. So when it comes into this one, it's going to be very fast. So it's going to be very sudden. It's not going to be a smooth ending. So if you wanted that ending to be smooth, you bring that down to 0 as well. And now they will start and end at you know, at varying levels of smoothness. So you can actually change the shape of this graph. And what you'll notice is that as I grow these, the scale of this will automatically increase. So this scale here is changing as I move these together. So as you see, it becomes very severe. It's like actually it's peaking out that in the middle of this curve, this graphic is traveling at 2,500 pixels per second. Now, I don't know if that's faster than a speeding bullet, but it's something. So what you'll notice now is that when you preview this, it's going to start slow, move fast, and end slow. This is very much kind of it's very stylish the way that motion graphics are done these days, to have very, very aggressive midpoints in terms of speed, in terms of editing the speed graph. So you have the ability to change this in the graph editor, and you also have the ability to change it using just what's called keyframe velocity. So, oh, here's another fun fact. So notice, and maybe you can't tell, maybe I'd have to zoom this in, and I didn't set zoom up. All right, I'll set zoom up. So apologies to the folks at home that you're not going to see this zoom because it doesn't work that way on the YouTube. All right, so if we zoom in, you notice that we have, there's the keyframe here actually has two shapes to it. There's the shape on the left side, and then there's the shape on the right side. So the thing to take away from here is that keyframes actually have two different velocities. You can treat them independently, so you have the incoming speed and the incoming velocity of a keyframe, the outgoing velocity of a keyframe, and they don't have to be the same. So if the outgoing velocity is constant, it's linear, and if the outgoing velocity is changing and it's 0, it's generally going to be Bezier. So that's why you'll see that you have half of a Bezier keyframe and half of a linear keyframe stuck together, because it actually the behavior on one side of the keyframe as it's coming into the keyframe is one way, and the behavior after, or the way that after this keyframe is different. So just keep that in mind, because that does come into play sometimes. All right, so the other way to deal with this is you can go to what's called keyframe velocity. So the way I got there was I right-clicked on the keyframe, go to keyframe velocity on the context menu, and it brings up this little window. So you'll see that it has an incoming velocity and an outgoing velocity. Well, right now, because there's nothing else happening on this keyframe, that's the outgoing velocity is 0, and its influence is also remarkably close to 0. The incoming is also 0, but the influence of it is a lot more because of the fact that it is a it actually has this curve over time. The speed graph is coming in over time. Now, if we change the speed graph so that this actually ends at a positive velocity, okay, so it's actually going to end, somewhere between, you'll see that when we go back to keyframe velocity, you'll see that the incoming velocity is not 0 now. It is actually 520 pixels per second. So that corresponds exactly to where that on the speed graph your keyframe will sit. So once we edit that, you go back in here, it's back down to 0. The notion of the influence, if you notice, this is the, if you see, when you drag on that little control point on the keyframe in the graph editor, you'll see that the influence is actually changing, and that influence shows you that's changing the shape of this curve over time. So there are some relatively well considered norms in motion graphics. One's 66 in and 66 out. So you can do 66.6 in and 66.6 out, and the motion looks like this. All right, it's very smooth on either end. You also have one that's like a 16 out and a 99, and something like this. So that it's going to start very suddenly and then come to a nice smooth end. So that's another way to deal with motion, where it starts very quickly, it enters very quickly, and then comes to a nice smooth halt. So the ways that you can modify these when you go into the keyframe velocity is you'll see that the speed is 0, the influence is 99, and then likewise for this one, if we change the keyframe velocity here, you'll see that it is 0 and 16, and you'll get this shape of a curve. So you have the ability to modify these values very specifically by using the keyframe velocity capability, which is, you can get to it from right-clicking on this, on the keyframe itself, or selecting the keyframe, coming over here where it says Edit Selected Keyframes, and you can go back in here and modify them this way. You also have the ability to deal with the very well used presets of easy ease, easy ease in and easy ease out. What those differences are is if you have a linear keyframe in and out. So let's say we change these both back to linear keyframes. Okay, they will, and you wanted to see how they looked in the graph editor to see that obviously the speeds are the same. If you change these to easy ease, sorry, here we go, easy ease, you'll see that it actually creates a very smooth curve from one to the other. So it's not very peaked up here. It's actually parabolic in shape, more or less. So you'll see that the keyframe here will, the keyframes are very, it's considered very smooth. If you go to look at the keyframe velocities, you'll see that they are even. There's 33 and 33, and that's how easy ease basically translates to the incoming and outgoing velocities. Also, you have, let's see, what else is fun for 2D? Let's talk a little bit about position. So when you look at position keyframes, something that can be very bothersome is that you might want to treat the X and Y positions differently. So you can come in here, you actually have one keyframe here and one there, and you want you want to actually be able to edit these individually over time, and you might actually keyframe them at different points in the timeline. And how that starts to become problematic is if you set this to this and you say, well, actually at this point I want Y to be here, and I want to leave X where it is, and then you come over here and you say, well, actually at this point I want Y to be here and X to be where it is. The trouble is that now you've locked both X and Y coordinates at these points. If you just wanted to modify one set of coordinates, the way to do that would not be to modify both of them at once, but rather to split them apart. The way to do that is actually going into the graph editor, and you see that for position and anchor, actually just for position, you can do this also with certain coordinate systems, but mostly position, is you have this option here to change that to separate, to change the graph to edit in separate dimensions. So what that will happen is if you click this while selecting position, you'll see that now you actually have an X position and a Y position that are separately keyframeable, okay? And they actually have different keyframes now on them in the timeline. So you have two sets of keyframes, one for X, and one for Y, and they're independently keyframeable. So the way that behaves is now if you come to this point and you want to change the Y position, you're just adding a keyframe to the Y position. The X position doesn't change, and the benefit of it is that if later on you want to change how these X position keyframes behave, like say move them separately, or maybe have them move in, or even change the value of them here, they will be changed completely separately from the Y values, so that you're not stuck. You don't basically lock the two together, and that is one of the more helpful things about this. So you can modify this independently. It doesn't change how this behaves in terms of how these other Y keyframes are dealt with.
Question.
Yes?
Where's the button that you use to separate them out?
So it's in the speed graph, okay? And it'll work for the X and Y positions. You come down here, you'll see there's a button down here, and I'll zoom it for you guys here so that you can see. It is this button right here, and it's one that you can toggle on and off. But once you've toggled it, it's generally, you do it for a reason. But you can basically, for X and Y, and when we do 3D animation, Z as well, can be changed independently of each other. That's a valuable thing to have handy. The other thing to note for the speed graph is that, or the graph editor, is that you can actually select several values and have them all show their graph on here together. That might be a little bit weird for some values, but you can actually select multiple properties and have them displayed on the graph at the same time. Just be aware that you have that ability. You can also have them scale. What this will do, this button here will take and fit all of the graphs into for the start and end. Start and end keyframes will show on either end of this, and so it can basically widen the view so that when you're looking at it, you can see just the motion or just those keyframes that you're following. Okay. Right. So you do have the ability to change what you're looking at here. Right now, we're having it show the selected properties, and you do have the ability to deal with. There are controls here to deal with how these controls behave on screen, and yeah, I mean this is the graph editor. It's not particularly challenging. Now, what else have I not shown you guys tonight that I need to show you? We might be really close to being done, actually. So switching back to our animation here of this, done the blah, 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 and blah, blah. Okay, so let's talk about, if I can get this to work correctly. So you do have the ability to set keyframes up to be what they call auto Bezier. Now these are basically the ability to modify the curves are kind of removed, and so they look like circles in the circle keyframes in the timeline. The other ones that are interesting to look at are hold keyframes, and yeah, actually that might be an interesting one to play with here. So when you go to this, you also have the option of doing a hold keyframe, and when you do that, what happens is the keyframes become very kind of, they'll jump from point to point. So what happens is this will come into this point, it will hold its position, and then on the next keyframe, because of the Y, actually it's because we're putting a hold on the Y, is when the Y changes, it will jump to this point. So if we wanted it to be hold on this end, can we do that? Let me see. Yeah, let's see if we can do this. No, it's going to be on that way. So it has to do with the behavior of this one on this end. So if we made this one a hold, you'd see. So toggle hold, the way that you can do this is, yeah, okay. So the hold keyframe will start at a certain Y level, and that's why we're putting hold keyframes on the Y value. And so the Y value changes, and then it jumps down to the next Y value, and then the next Y value. And if you had this on both position for X and Y, what that would look like is we would have keyframes. So if we made all of these, hang on, let me get this one too. All right, so if we made all of these hold keyframes, what would that look like? Oops, darn it, there we go. All right. So we click on hold, they will jump from point to point. Okay, they're just going to basically jump from point to point over the animation. They don't actually move because these are hold keyframes. They just hold the position until the next keyframe, and then depending on what that keyframe is, will change its behavior to a motion or to linear or busy or any of the other things. But in the initial, it's just hold, so it just kind of jumps from point to point, and that's how hold keyframes can play in terms of maintaining a value until you want to change it, and then it absolutely instantaneously changes at that frame. So there's no interpolation at all. Go figure. So this is like the ultimate in reductive frame interpolation, is like 0 frame interpolated. It goes from this one and then immediately goes to that one on the next keyframe. All right, so any questions on how keyframes operate, how they are, what interpolation means? Also, any questions about the graph editor? If you guys have these, feel free to pose them or bring them up in email. I will try to set something up so that you guys can have a little more discussion amongst yourselves. But the idea here of the basics of keyframe animation, and because we played with scale and position, all right? I mean, clearly there's anywhere that you see a stopwatch in After Effects, you can use any of these techniques to animate it. That by itself can actually lead to a lot of interesting discoveries and notions. This all leads back to my tagline of "The rabbit hole has no bottom." This is the first step into a much more complicated world of animating for you guys. So, all right, I think that's it for tonight. Next week, we are going to start to talk about 3D animation and how that behaves, how when you start to behave with a Z, a virtual depth. And I'm not positive if we talk about cameras, and we might talk about cameras and lights and other stuff like that as well. I do know that we have a lot more to go in that, but that's probably going to be after spring break at this point. So yeah, we're going to do this for this week. We do the beginnings of 3D animations next week. Your midterm is over the spring break, and it's not over the spring break. You can do it between the end of class next week and the day before we come back from spring break on the 27th. Okay? Have a great week, everybody. Thank you. Don't forget to bring up your thing if you haven't brought it back up.